Hi friends, good afternoon friends. I, CS Rajesh Tarpara, Central Council member and also heading CCGRT and heading various other committee. Welcome you all in this webinar by ICSI on structural digital database and FAQs. And today we have eminent faculties and panelists with us. Before I introduce one by one, I just welcome to our Vice President B. Narasimhan sir. I welcome you, sir. I also recognize the presence of Mohan Kumarji, Central Council member from SIRC. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Okay. Then we have panelist one. Friends, today the exchange is with intent to ensure the compliance is asking listed entities to submit quarterly compliance reports either by certified by professionals, PCS, or compliance officer of the company pertaining to maintenance of SSD on a quarterly basis. The Institute, in furtherance of its continuous endeavor to organize the various programs and enhance the capacity building of the members, particularly to PIT regulations specially, and have today organized this wonderful webinar along with the wonderful faculties. The panelist one today, Ms. Varsha Agrawal, General Manager, Integrated Surveillance Department, Securities and Exchange Board of India. Ms. Varsha is General Manager, worked with SEBI since last 20 years. She works with the Integrated Surveillance Department of the SEBI. Prior to that, she has worked with Market Regulation Department, Mutual Fund Division, in Investment Management Department, Regional Office at Delhi, and various places. She has played a very vital role in handling insider trading cases and has handled policies for depository inspection, administration of stock exchanges, and formulation of policy on mutual fund, and has also handled matter relating to collective investment scheme dealt by the SEBI. She holds MA Economics and Chartered Accountancy degree also, and she is Company Secretary by profession. Welcome you, madam. Next is Avishkar Nayak, Vice President Surveillance from NSE, National Stock Exchange. Sir, welcome you. And Mr. Avishkar Nayak is a Chartered Accountant as well as Company Secretary by profession. He has been working in NSE for more than 18 years and has headed various departments such as investigation, surveillance, clearing, corporation technology, and listing. He is trained in Six Sigma and specialized in training data mining tools. He has been awarded as a CA Professional Achiever by Institute of Chartered Accountant of India. Welcome you, sir. Thanks. Now, next panelist today with us is Mr. Rajendra Chopra ji. She is a Secretary of Cipla Limited. Rajendra Chopra is Associate Member of ICSI and is law graduate with 27 years of experience in corporate sector. He is associated with Cipla for past 5 years and is heading the secretarial function as a group company secretary. He is member of FICCI Corporate Law Committee. He is regular speaker in various conferences and seminars organized by various organs of the ICSI and other professional bodies across the country. Welcome you, sir. And our fourth panelist today we have with us Shaila Sri Bhaskar. She is a practicing company secretary and graduate in MBA from Madurai. She is fellow member of ICSI and have a 22 years or more experience in the SEBI related matters and other areas. She has been regular faculties in various professional bodies like ICSI, ICAI, NISM, and NSC on various topics. She is very expert in ICDR regulations, preferential allotment, listing compliances, settlement regulations, PIT regulations, and many more. I am sure that the discussion, I welcome you, madam.
Thank you.
Friends, I am sure that the discussion under this webinar would serve an intellectual platform for all of us to comply with the SEBI SDD, and very complexity will be unrevealed and revealed. So fraternity will be having good takeaways out of this today's webinar. So I now hand over our Vice President to say few words on the occasion.
Thank you, Rajesh. Good afternoon, everybody. Distinguished panelists and my colleagues in the council, Mr. Mohan Kumar, Mr. Rajesh Tarpara. I'm reminiscing the event which took place on 17th and 18th August on STD, where we had the panelists from both NSD, NSC, BSc, as well as SEBI and our own members, where we threadbare discuss some of the analysis in terms of what STD is all about. Control on sharing of unpublished price-sensitive information by those who are having access to it in a structured manner is one of the sensitive areas dealt with by SEBI prohibition of insider trading regulation. You would recall that in July 2019, SEBI had issued a circular regarding the requirement of maintenance of a structured digital database. Subsequently, in August 2022, both the stock exchange issued their circulars requesting all the listed companies to comply with the requirement of an STD for the period ended 30th June 2022. That caused a bit of a furore because our members were not fully ready for it. And then we had two programs, both on 17th of August and 18th of August, where we discussed all these aspects of STD in a detailed manner. Some solace was made to the members in terms of the requirement of STD, but still plenty more was required to be done. The president of the institute, Mr. Devendra Deshpande, set up a small group, of which I was also a member, to prepare a small manual on STD. And this was, we had both, for that, in fact, both the panelists who are there today, both Sailashri Bhaskar as well as Rajendra Chopra, were part of the panelists who went through the process of preparing this manual, which has been released by ICSI in the Corporate Governance Award function held in January this year. Well, STD is an evolving process, and there are a lot more things which will be required to be done. The initial manual has a lot of comfort to the members, but still there has been some nagging doubts in their mind, and therefore we thought fit to have the regulators once again with us. And I'm sure whatever arises out of this discussion today will be included in the next edition of the STD, which will come up soon, possibly in a couple of months' time. There has been one question which has been raised by several members with me regarding maintenance of STD in cloud. I think the FAQs of STD of SEBI provides for maintaining in cloud, provided the cloud is owned by the corporate itself. Now that is a cost prohibitive exercise, and therefore there has been a request made, and I'm sure this is an active consideration by SEBI. And I expect that I also shared this thought with Ms. Varsha when I spoke to her about the need for allowing companies to maintain their database in STD, in cloud, because in fact in cloud, they also have a lot more confidential information beyond only STD. Therefore, I understand it's under active consideration, and we will get to know something about it. We have an expert panel of Varsha. Varsha was also there alongside Kranti Sardesai in the program webinar we had on 17th and 18th of August, and I'm sure she will throw a lot of light into it. Mr. Avishkar Naik from NSC was also there with us on the program on the 18th of August, and I'm sure he will also be able to take us through the requirement of what need to be done by the STD. In the meanwhile, both the stock exchanges have been visiting corporates and have been verifying and certifying the maintenance of the STD by them. And I believe there has been certain observation which has been made by the stock exchanges with the regulator. And I'm sure some of those issues will be discussed in today's webinar. I wish the webinar all the success, and I wish both my panelists, both Sailashri and Rajendra Chopra, to carry the responsibilities cast on them and to do a great job about it. All the very best. Thank you very much. Over to you, Rajesh.
Thank you.
Thank you, President, Vice President, sir. Thank you. Now, I invite for introductory remark from Miss Varsha, Madam.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I thank ICSI for giving this opportunity. And I also wish to thank ICSI for playing such a great role in finalizing various things relating to SDD in the last few months, like FAQs, wherein ICSI then conducting of the training programs and that manual which just now Mr. Narasimhan mentioned. So I acknowledge that ICSI has played a great role in our endeavor to get the SDD implemented as per the requirement that has been laid down in the regulations. So I'll start my talk with the importance of SDD, why a regulator is insisting on maintenance of SDD. We will start with a case study wherein we were undertaking seeing some, like, SEBI alert mechanism is there. So from alerts, we came to know some kind of, there is some instance which needs to be looked into in detail. So there was a company XYZ. I'm not taking the names here. I'm not giving the particular details. I'm just giving the example. The company had gone into a strategic partnership with a very big organization. For this, some public announcements were being made. It was there in the newspapers everywhere. It is the largest deal and so many employees are involved in this process. It was having an effect on the book of the companies also, but it was the company which was in question, a very prominent listed company, didn't consider that information as UPSI. So for that, no SDD was maintained. So for us, it becomes a difficult situation if such kind of information, such kind of pointers are there and companies on their own decide that it is not a UPSI and they don't maintain the SDD. Why SDD is required? Because if regulator is looking into a particular transaction, then we need to know who are involved in that, who is the beneficiary, and then only we will be able to proceed further. The requirement of maintaining SDD has been a part of the regulations. So every listed company or proposed to be listed company is required to adhere to the requirement of regulations. Now, if we move ahead, in case insider trading, then we need to know who are the persons who are in possession of UPSI. How will we know? Because their name has to be entered in SDD. Then only we will come to know who are the persons who are in possession of UPSI. And when UPSI reach to a person, then who has shared UPSI? Every sharing is supposed to be included in the SDD. Was information received for some legitimate purpose or was trading done while in possession? All these things we will be able to analyze only when information, when it is UPSI, it is shared. It has to be entered in the SDD between whom it is shared. Then let us see the timelines when SDD was inserted in PIT. First, we will see the SEBI PIT regulation. It came into form in 2015. So, like Mr. Narasimhan mentioned, in April 2019, sub-regulation 3.5 was inserted, wherein requirement was laid down on the company to start maintaining SDD. After that, there was one amendment on July 2020, where regulation 3.6 came into force. Then we specified what is required to be entered, and this SDD has to be maintained for a period of 8 years. There is no discretion on the hand of the company that I will maintain it for 3 years, 6 years, or whatever. It has clearly been specified. It has to be maintained for 8 years, and there has to be an audit trail, and timestamping is a must. We don't want anybody to do any changes in that system without having such proper records to be there in the system. And every time this question is being asked whether maintaining of SDD in Excel is okay. No, it is not okay. It is not a non-temporable thing. So we are not okay if you are maintaining your SDD in Excel. Then to what steps, I'll cover what steps SEBI has taken to ensure that the companies are maintaining the SDD, because you know SDD requirement came into force in 2019. And now then after that, sometime 2020, one more insertion, and after that COVID came. So in between, we found there was lack of compliance from the companies regarding this SDD part. So when we took up with the exchanges, then we realized that it is not being maintained properly. So we thought before doing anything, let us have extensive training programs. So extensive training programs were done by exchanges in coordination with ICSI also. Then these FAQs were issued by exchanges again in coordination with ICSI. Then after various discussions, circulars were issued. This verification process started, wherein exchanges started verifying whether exchanges listed companies are maintaining that SDD or not. Then they came out with the circulars on what action they will be taking if the company is not maintaining SDD. Companies are supposed to be aware of whatever circulars exchange has prescribed on that, and they should keep those circulars in mind. And now the latest development, white circular dated 16th March, the compliance with SDD has become part of annual secretarial audit from FY ended March 31, 2023 onwards. So now it, as a part of secretarial audit, the requirement of compliance of SDD will be monitored by the secretarial auditor. So this is from my side. These are the steps we are taking. Everybody is supposed to be aware that any listed company or proposed to be listed company is required to maintain SDD, and whatever has been prescribed in regulation 3.5 and 3.6 of PIT regulation 2015, that they have to adhere to. There is no exemption. Nobody can come up and ask, I may be given exemption for this reason or that reason. Everybody who comes into that bracket has to maintain. So that is it from my side.
Thank you, Varsha madam. Thank you for sharing the importance of STD and the history and what the companies need to do. You shared in a very, very lucid manner. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you.
Yeah, we now move on to Mr. Avishkar Nayak, VP Surveillance from NSE India. Mr. Avishkar, over to you to share your thoughts.
Thanks ICSI, Narasimhanji, Rajeshji and Mohanji for inviting us and having given us this platform to reach out to a large number of our compliance officers and PECS on this very important topic of SDD. If you see, PIT has always been the area of great interest globally. And if, say, the market integrity has to be maintained, then SDD is the way forward. Financial markets, wherever we see, if they have to fund the real economy, then the trust and confidence has to be built in that particular market. So just look at this, that if we as a particular listed entity want investor participation in our stocks or want liquidity or even want competitive pricing for our listed entity, then we have to have work towards making our markets fairer. With this particular thing in mind, the TK Vishwanathan Committee, or what we call as the Fair Market Conduct Committee, had come out with this particular idea of this particular database, and which was subsequently incorporated as Regulation 3.5 and 3.6 of the PIT. And this was way back in 2019. Now, in this particular case also, I'm emphasizing on the word way back, because say, if you see, this has been in place for the last 4 years, but when we go and check the compliance status on this particular thing, it's not up to the mark. Structured digital database, everyone has to, at this point of time, keep in mind that it's clearly the focus areas, and that's why if you see the regulator or the exchanges or even practitioners and institute is being part of such sessions. We have around 5 or 6 sessions at least we have attended where we have talked about the STD. So it's a focus area, and everyone has to give utmost importance and look at it from a compliance perspective. As a practitioner, we also have to look at the intent of that regulation, and if we are understand that particular intent, then it will be clear to us, and it will be clearing all the doubts. Because what typically happens is in such seminars, or even when we keep on getting questions, they typically are all operational in nature and all that way. So the intent is, if you want to understand what that regulation, go by its intent. And if the intent is clear, all your doubts get cleared at that particular moment. This database is to establish the trail of flow of information, and is for helping in the investigation of insider trading matters. And hence, the mantra should always be that in case of doubt, you go and record. The regulator is also regulator, or the regulations is also very clear that the board of directors or the head of the organizations have to handle the UPSI. They have to ensure that sharing of UPSI is for legitimate purpose, and it should contain the name, PAN, and features such as the timestamp and trail for 8 years. It has to be maintained. The database has also to be under the supervision of the compliance officer and has to be reviewed periodically. Exchange has so far, both Exchange, NSE and BSE have conducted physical verification of about 400 companies, and about 500 companies virtually will be completing the 1,000 mark by 31st March. There are a few practices which we observed during our inspections, which we felt are good, and that I would like to share 1 or 2 practices. And majorly, if you see, when I talk about these practices, they are simple to implement and effective in that particular case. You need not think much for implementing such cases and all. When we did this inspection, few companies, what they have tried to do is they have started tagging their emails. So the email categories can be, say, one is UPSI, internal, external, etc. So that way they have been trying to tag their emails, and these emails are getting recorded in their particular database. Then few companies which we observed is the sender of the UPSI is getting an acknowledgement that this particular email has reached, and their database is storing that particular confirmation. So in a sense, it is again recording that the recipient has received the UPSI in this when the sender has sent it. Then there is another case where they have implemented maker checker, because say what typically happens is, say in the initial part you have added the records, and then subsequently one tends to forget it or has not updated. So they have post their implementation brought in some sort of a maker checker. Now on the flip side, in the sense, what all were the observations which are still there, in the sense we are, that's why again I emphasize on the 4 years period, because after 4 years also, if we look at what is the sort of non-compliances which we have still now observed is, one is the database is not able to maintain an audit trail, which is one of the important part of the regulations. It has not been maintained internally when we actually went and checked whether it is easily tamperable. So we basically are also not from the technology side, but when we go and see the database, we can also observe that it's clearly temperable and all that way. So again, it's not that you require a technology guy to come and tell you that, okay, there is some temperability. We ourselves, without having a technology background, also can identify that the database was easily temperable and all that. Then there was few companies who have maintained in Excel, and clearly the FAQs and everyone has clearly said and articulated that Excel is not acceptable. Few companies have gone to such an extent that they have said that in my company, the UPSI is only financial results. So I am maintaining only financial results as UPSI. No other announcement is falling under UPSI category. So that also a stance we have not accepted. Then there are certain softwares which we observed is not taking the PANs in the correct format. So even if you say, example, typically a PAN contains 4 numerics, then 4 alphabets, then numerics, and then alphabet. So you can actually write 1, 2, 3, 4, and that too that the database was accepting. So it's like completely unacceptable type of thing, for which we have sent this non-compliance letters to the companies and all that. Another thing what we have tried to do is say, as Varsha ma'am also covered, that we over the last 1.5 years have been trying to have all sorts of seminars, training sessions and all that way. Last year we introduced this compliance certificate, wherein the compliance officer has started giving this compliance certificate on the completeness of the structure or the maintenance of the structured digital database. Now from 31st March onwards, we have shifted it to the PCS. So the PCS will be giving us in a secretarial compliance report the affirmation on the compliance with this particular SDD database. ICSI has also carried out released a manual on SDD. The document that way is very helpful. If you go through at the FAG end, they have actually come out with a checklist as a secretarial auditor, what all areas have to be checked and what is that area on basis which they can give their reports and all that. I would like to conclude over here and will be open for questions. But before concluding, let me again reiterate that in case the Mool Mantra in SDD has to be, in case you are in any sort of doubt, go and record it in the database. It will help the compliance officers significantly. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ravishkar, for your opening remarks, and you also touched upon the good practices, also certain practices which are not acceptable. You also mentioned the importance of secretarial compliance certificate this year, and where PCS needs to talk about the SDD compliance also. Thank you, friends. We have heard from 2 regulators. Now we will hear from one company secretary in employment and one company secretary in practice. Now over to Mr. Rajendra Chopra, CS of Cipla Limited. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Mohan. Thank you, ICSI, for this wonderful opportunity to interact with this panelist. There was a time when the PIT compliance was a secretarial job. A company secretary would lay down the policy and then, they will just clear some trades. They will file some disclosure and the matter ends. In past few years, especially after 2015, this has evolved considerably. And especially after 2019, when we had this concept of SDD, this has significantly changed. We can understand the importance and significance of this change that for the first time, I think, at least in my experience and in the history, that stock exchanges has gone to the corporates at this level and inspected the practices of the companies. Aviskar has just shared his experience of the inspection. But, if we go through this, we can understand the seriousness of the STD. Also, we can understand the seriousness of the STD with the fact that there has been so many seminars, knowledge sessions, working groups who have worked on this, the manual on STD which has been released by the institute. So all that explain the importance, criticality, and significance of the compliance under the PIT regulation, including the SDD. It is no more a responsibility of the company secretary. If we read the law now, after 2015, at maximum places, we will see that the board of directors or the head of the organization, equivalent to the board of directors, is responsible for ensuring the compliances. You know, at every level, the board of directors, the company secretary, the CEO, the audit committee, everybody has been made responsible, and now the auditors have also been given the responsibility to certify the compliances. So every stakeholder in the governance framework is now required to ensure that the PIT regulation compliances are complied with. In particular for SDD, there are clear responsibilities that the board need to ensure that there are systems and processes in place for the compliance of the SDD related provisions. The CEO is required to ensure that there are adequate and effective systems and internal controls relating to SDD in place for the organization. The company secretary, being the executive, being responsible for the execution of the compliances or administration of the compliances, is required to ensure that company has a proper software to record the UPSI and the database of the people who share or who receive the information. It also requires, the company secretary is also responsible to ensure that there are proper policies or at least processes in place to identify what is UPSI. People may or may not come to him to understand if information is a UPSI or not. Across the organization, if UPSI can be generated at any corner of the organization. So he needs to ensure and lay down the processes that whenever there is a UPSI or a potential UPSI, the relevant compliances are ensured. They also need to ensure that the people who share the UPSI are made aware of the obligations under the regulation. That is, one, to maintain the confidentiality of the UPSI, whosoever received the UPSI. Second, if the information are further shared with anybody else, the communication of the fact that this information is UPSI and need to be dealt in a particular manner. This need to be educated by the company secretary. Then, once the information is shared, whosoever share the information, there is an obligation on the person to ensure that the database of the people who receive the information and who share the information is maintained on a software. He is also responsible to ensure that the software is capable to keep the data for 8 years, either from the completion of the UPSI or if there are investigation, etc., then from the completion of the UPSI. And then there is an external certification requirement. We have to submit a quarterly certificate to the stock exchanges. So the company secretary need to ensure that yes, objectively the company has complied with all the regulatory requirement. It may be maintenance of the SDD, entry in the record, entry of the designated person or recipient of the UPSI, and maintenance of the structural digital database, etc. So all the compliances have been ensured. And then if required, he may have to take counter certificate from other, or he may have to certify. He may also decide to take the certificate from the practicing company secretary for submission to the stock exchanges. Likewise, the audit committee has also been given the responsibility under the law that they need to supervise the compliance. They need to continuously monitor that the compliances are in place and are being undertaken. There are periodical certification and report which are required to be submitted to the audit committee. So, there is a responsibility to the board, there is a responsibility for the CEO, there is a responsibility for the audit committee, and of course, there is a responsibility on the company secretary and the practicing company secretary or the secretarial auditor also. Requirement is very simple. Whenever we share a UPSI, we need to maintain the record of the people whosoever get access to the UPSI. This is the simple requirement. I think we need to understand the spirit of the law. The compliance will become very simple. If we try to, manipulate the compliance or find a gateway to not at least to not to comply, or to find a way to avoid the compliance, then the things will become complicated. Then we will be required to go to a lot of consultants. We will be required to probably speak to the stock exchange. We will have a lot of doubt that, okay, this is a situation, it doesn't fall, it may not be a UPSI, it may be so, all these questions will come if we will try to manipulate. Otherwise, I think the requirement is simple. Yes, there can be some genuine concern. There can be a difference in the understanding. That all we will try to discuss and resolve in next 1 hour. But yeah, this is how I believe the compliances on the STD is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rajendra Chopra. In fact, it was really very happy to listen from the person in the hot seat, the whole of SDD, company secretary in employment, particularly in a listed company. It's a very, very pivotal role, a very critical role, and you really shared the spirit of the law in a very, very simple manner towards the end of your speech. Thank you very much, Mr. Rajendra Chopra. Now we move on to the practicing CS, who requires no introduction. Ms. Sri Bhaskar, over to you, madam.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much to ICSI for giving this opportunity. We have been listening to the regulator, quasi-regulator, who has actually visited the company secretary. Now the mantle is to the practicing company secretary. And the responsibility is to check and to see if the SDD is meeting the various prerequisites that are laid down by the regulator through the regulations and implemented through stock exchange circulars and other mechanisms and regular guidelines from time to time. First and foremost, I would like to say initially when we started off with SDD in 2019, everybody took it very, very lightly. Every time I used to go for an audit, I would insist that we have to move on from maintaining this in an Excel sheet. This won't do, because I would see entries being made in that Excel sheet 1 year down the line. Yeah, we shared the financial information then, this was how it is, etc. So that was not the way compliance was to be done. We have graduated. Now you see everything is technology driven and software has been installed in almost all the listed entities to ensure compliance with the SDD requirements as we have moved on in time from 2019 to 2023. So when we check as a PCS, when we give a certificate, the first thing that we need to see is whether the UPSI that is being shared is maintained in a software which is not kept outside the company. It should be in the company premises, handled by the company secretary or the executives in the company only. Second important thing that we need to see is that in case we have several group entities and they're all maintaining it on a common server, it's absolutely okay, but there should be proper firewalls so that this company's information is not mixed up with another group company's information. This is another checkpoint that we need to see. Third important checkpoint as a PCS that we have to see is take a list of all the designated persons and see if their names are actually appearing in the list of, as in the database that is there in the SDD. Sometimes, by oversight, some names may be missing. So we'll have to, first of all, ensure that it is there. We have to check with the company secretary whether all the names are there and physically verify and see whether the designated person's names are there in the SDD. And if any new person's name is appearing in the SDD, the reason why it is appearing should be understood before we take it further. Now, one practical problem that we as PCS will face is company secretary may not be aware of all the UPSI that is floating in the organization at all points in time. UPSI is generated or germinated is a common term that is being used at different places, different departments in an organization. So how does the CS come to know? How is the CS held responsible for making this entry? So for that, we need to have, proper training at various heads of the departments that in case they feel that it is a UPSI, they should be encouraged to discuss with the CS and take a decision as to whether the entry is to be made in the SDD. Because this leads us to a very interesting point as to whether multiple persons can make an entry into the SDD. So if that were so, then would it qualify as tamperable is something we have to discuss, because if 5 different people were to make entries at different points, then is that really the sanctity is what something we have to ponder about. Another thing is Mr. Avishkar was saying, when in doubt, disclose, or when in doubt, make the entry. Because this is very similar to what we used to have seminar under Regulation 30 of the LODR, wherein we used to use this acronym WIDD. When in doubt, disclose. Whenever you feel there is it could be a UPSI, when you feel it's price sensitive, make a disclosure under Regulation 30. So now when the PCS is checking whether, as a part of the secretarial audit, whether all the unpublished price sensitive information that was generated in the company during the year under audit, except financial results, because faithfully all entries will be made with regard to the financial results, because we have no doubt about it. What about several other events? There could have been a attempted takeover. There could have been a merger thought that could have happened. Sometimes we would have discussed a split. Sometimes we could have discussed a bonus issue, a rights issue, which may not have seen the end of the day, but then there could have been discussions. Whether all these are price sensitive in nature, whether these require an entry or not. So for that, some guidance can be taken from the disclosures that have been made by the company under Regulation 30. All disclosures under Regulation 30 need not find an entry in the SDD. But there could be some hints from there, and we could cross-verify whether this actually found a place in the SDD. And being a secretarial auditor, we are having access to the minutes book, because we do check the minutes book to see if there are compliances under the Companies Act and other disclosures under the listing regulations, etc. So any discussions therein could also help us take a decision as to whether that should have found an entry into the SDD. So at the end of the day, the PCS is giving a certificate saying that the SDD is maintained by the company in accordance with the regulations. It is, all the required information is captured. The nature of the UPSI is captured. The person with whom it is shared is captured. Their PAN number is correct. It is captured. So, and we are also saying that every time it is shared, the entry is made. There is an audit trail. There is time stamping. It is not tamperable. Now, when we give such a kind of a certification, every single point that we are checking must be thoroughly verified, not in 1 year, year after year, because each year things might differ, might change, and we have to keep pace with the regulations as we go on. It's not going to be a very easy job. It's a learning process. Maybe this year we may falter a bit, but then as we go on, I'm sure we will do an excellent job, because that is how we learn as to how this SDD is going to be implemented. Because as Mr. Narasimhan said, and all regulators have also, it's an evolving concept, and I think by some time it will become a very perfect tool for implementation. So that is all I have to say, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Shailashri Madam. Panelists, now we move on to the question and answer session, and we have received a lot of questions from our members. First, let me take certain questions on applicability. A lot of members have asked certain questions on applicability. Varsha Madam, is the entry in SDD synchronizes with the sharing of information, or it is to be entered subsequently? If it is a subsequent entry, within how much time is the entry is to be made?
As per my understanding, entry has to be made after sharing of information and as soon as possible.
In fact, Avishkar sir, one more member has asked whether entries required to be made in the database prior to sharing the UPSI or promptly after such sharing. In the recent complaint certificate format issued by the stock exchanges, they have sought confirmation from listed entities whether such entries are made in the database prior to sharing.
So let me take it a bit in detail and all that. So you have to look at the type of information which you are currently handling. Say, take the example of financial results. If as a compliance officer, financial results, you have complete that way control. You know that, okay, this from this particular date, this are the set of people who in the finance department are going to handle a particular UPSI. So in that case, typically the entry can be made upfront, in the sense before the entire process starts. There are certain cases where, say, as Shaileshri ma'am was also saying, the information has germinated in some other department, and at a later date, say the compliance officer or he is brought into that at a later date. In that circumstances, that entry, we are saying it can be subsequently, but it should not be that, okay, you take a month's time and all that way. The whole idea in this particular case is that if we go and start recommending something, it will become very, very operational and all. So example, if we say that, okay, 2 days, then people will start and checking, okay, 2 days, is it 2 working days, 2 trading days? Then someone will say that there's a holiday, it's a Gudi Padwa holiday here, so that's why I should get 1 more day. A whole lot of operational things will start coming in if we start prescribing. That's why go to the intent, and the moment you come to know, go and record it. It should not be that, okay, in financial results also I go and start recording it after 10-15 days after the information is gone and all. Where you have control, at least start recording, then and follow it consistently. That's the main part in this particular exercise.
So Aviskar, sorry, I'll add here. If I understand correctly, while the technical requirement is to make the entries as soon as possible immediately after sharing the information, it is a recommendation that wherever the information sharing is predictable or planned, we should make the advance entries in the SDD software.
Right.
Fair point. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Avishkar and Varsha madam. One more question. In a family managed company, the promoters, chairman, and the managing directors are normally family members who can discuss about any matters, whether takeover, merger, bonus issue, etc., during even their dinner time, and communicating the message with each other. We do not know who initiated the discussion and who is the receiver and who is the sender of UPSI. In such circumstances, how can the data be captured in database?
Should I just share some experiences on this?
Yes, madam. Yeah.
See, I've had the privilege to represent many people before SEBI adjudicating officers, and some interesting cases have come my way, particularly under PIT. 2-3 cases are one very typical like this. A family, comprising of almost 10-15 people discuss a very important matter. Let us say whether to issue a bonus share or whether to declare a dividend over the dining table. Okay? And they decide and they say, yes, let's go for it. All 15 of them know it. And next day, the person, the CFO, CEO calls the CS and says, you call a meeting and then we want to discuss about declaration of bonus. Now, already, if you see, there has been UPSI generated over the dining table. But what the SDD says is the moment it is shared, you have to enter. Now, the CS will not know that 15 people or 20 people discussed this matter over the dining table. So the moment he or she comes to know, entry will have to be made into the SDD. Now, if any of these 15 people have traded in the shares, then it's a different matter altogether, because that goes beyond the scope of SDD. So if they discuss over a dining table or at the home, we all know promoters are perpetually in possession of UPSI. So always it's assumed that their name, whether it is entered or not, is there in the SDD. So it is after that, when you say it is germinated and flows down the line, that we will start making entry. Divi's labs came in order. If you see from SEBI also, it's very clear that the person who traded was someone way below the line. Whereas it had crossed several other, 5-6 levels, and the person who actually traded was someone 6 whose name we would have never even thought would have traded, because he was secretary to somebody. So, it is all practically varies from case to case basis. So the moment it is shared, we'll make the entry in the SDD, irrespective of whether people sat in the dining hall watching a TV, went to the movie hall, or at the dining table, wherever it is that this idea came up.
Thank you, madam.
If I may add a
Another
question.
question. If data is shared internally several times a day, does it have to be entered in SDD each time?
So that we have clearly clarified also that only one entry is enough. That.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Rajendra Chopra ji, if an entry is made to the SDD about sharing of an UPSI to a DP, however, trading window was not closed for the DP, will the compliance officer be responsible for a breach of obligation?
If we understand the law, according to me, whenever there is a UPSI which has been germinated or generated in the system, the trading window closure is mandatory. And more specifically, if the information have been shared with internally with the designated person. So it is definitely a deviation from the compliance.
Okay. Shailashri madam, if the database is to be maintained internally and not with the help of outside software vendor, then how timestamping on audit trail requirements can be met?
No, I did not say that it has to be not maintained with the software vendor. You can buy the software from the vendor. Otherwise, we cannot do it. We are no companies technologically so advanced. But this SDD itself should not be maintained at the vendor's office. There was this concept in 2019. A couple of companies were marketing the software in such a way that the software was maintained at their office and the company could have access to it. I think that is why SEBI came out with a clarificatory circular saying that it has to be maintained in-house. Because what we're doing is we're sharing a lot of UPSI with a third party, and we do not know what the third party will actually be doing with that unpublished price-sensitive information. So the only request is it has to be maintained within the or in the company's premises, but it can be from any vendor. Because otherwise, how will we know? You know, even with the software that has come from the vendor, as Mr. Avishkar was saying, there is no time stamping or audit trail that is visible.
Okay. There are few questions about certain entities for which SDD is applicable. Mr. Avishkar, if you can answer, whether maintaining SDD applicable to a suspended company?
Yes, so if it's listed, then it has to be maintained.
Yeah, suspended company, they are referring to the
yes.
entity only. Yeah.
Yes. So we have to keep in mind that whether it's a listed or not listed. So if a suspended company is not delisted, it doesn't have the delisting status, so it needs to be maintained.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Avishkar. I think the next to following question also only you will be able to answer. Is the insider trading regulations applicable to a high value debt listed company having more than 500 crores non-convertible debentures listed at a stock exchange?
Yes, it's applicable. And there were multiple in the sense, I think so in the earlier thing also, many of the companies, this particular set of question came actually from debt listed companies also, that what type of UPSI they have and why should they be maintaining the SDD. And also in that part also we had explained that there could be 2 or 3 scenarios where even a debt listed company may have a particular sort of UPSI, and hence this particular SDD maintenance is applicable to debt listed companies also.
Thank you. Next one, whether SDD is applicable to the limited purpose of clearing corporation. Limited purpose clearing corporation.
So it's if it's listed, then again we'll have to go by that particular thing only. That if it's listed, then I'm not exactly clear on what scenario this is, but that way one has to go by listed, not listed type of thing. And whether he is an intermediary or fiduciary, that way. So if he is falling under that bucket, he has to maintain it.
I think they mean clearing corporation or stock exchanges. This question is.
No, limited purpose clearing corporation is a different entity.
Yeah. So if it's a registered, SEBI registered intermediary, it will have to be covered.
Yeah. If it is receiving, then it has to.
Okay. Are companies who got approval for IPO from stock exchange required to file SDD?
Yes, so that also we have clarified that it is not only applicable to listed, likely to get listed also is covered.
Okay, then another provision regarding structural database is applicable in case of company which issued privately placed NCD.
So again, this are all this different type of scenarios. So whether we'll have to go by the background in the sense, if it's a listed entity, then it has to maintain. So I am sticking to that particular stance because I am not aware of under what background this privately listed NCDs are being issued and all that.
Okay. Thank you. We will move on to some questions on UPSI. Mr. Rajendra Chopra, whether draft financials shared with the auditors for audit purpose, whether they are UPSI draft financials?
Yes, they are UPSI.
Okay. I think this one also you will be able to tell Mr. Rajendra at what stage entry of UPSI related to financial results is to be entered first in the SDD, whether at the initial stage or every time the same results with some minor corrections flow internally from one person to another person.
So I think entry has to be made at the time when the information has been shared with the person for the first time. Now, whether there are certain software, I know, and there are certain companies who have a practice of, recording the entry at every time the email goes. Probably it's because the software has been linked to the email ID and every time they record. But it is a practice. The expectation of the law is that at least for the first time when the information is shared with anybody, the entry should be made in the SDD. If they do multiple entry, it is not a non-compliance.
Okay. Is SDD applicable to SME listed companies, Mr. Avishkar?
Yes, it is applicable.
Okay. Is it possible that for a certain quarter, the certificate is given by the compliance officer and for the next quarter, the certificate is given by a practicing professional?
Yes, so that is also okay with us. But as I said, from 31st March onwards, this will also go away because we are shifting it to the secretarial audit.
Okay. Ms. Shailashri, who all should have access to insert the details of UPSI, whether the possessor or receiver of UPSI, and should it be through different login IDs?
No, it should be only with one person, neither the possessor nor the receiver. Every time it is shared, the person authorized to make the entry alone shall make the entry. So now how are we going to ensure that the person who's making the entry is aware that it has been shared at different points is something that every organization has to work out, because sometimes it may just get missed out. But if we give multiple persons entry, like say 10 people are allowed to enter, every time I receive, I make an entry. I don't know how we are going to ensure the sanctity of the information that is there in the SDD. Varsha ma'am can add more value, I feel. I mean, this is my thought process.
It is the responsibility of the HOD, the board of directors, to ensure that every information that is in the nature of UPSI is entered in SDD. So whatever system they feel, if they want to give multiple logins, okay, this particular HOD will enter, like if suppose there is one HOD relating to amalgamation or whatever. So they will be able to do the entry for their division, their department. It's up to them. But we want entries to be there for UPSI that has been shared among people. It is up to the HOD and the board of directors to come up with whatever process they feel best.
So Mohanji, in one of the cases where we actually went, what we saw is in a larger organization, they have given access to the HODs to make the entry. But say in case any modification, because there was some error or some modification has to be made, the database actually records it as a journal entry that this record is being changed and all. But that power is given only to the compliance officer, because ultimately the compliance officer handles everything. You cannot allow an HOD to go and make the modifications and all. So that way they are keeping the entire control over this particular system.
Okay. Mr. Rajendra Chopra, whether non-execution of NDA is a non-compliance, is it sufficient if a notice of sharing information for legitimate purposes given to such recipient?
So, if we read regulations, we provide that whenever we share the information, UPSI with anybody, then either we should execute a NDA or we should give a notice to the recipient of the information that the information is a UPSI and they need to ensure that the information is shared on need-to-know basis and the other compliances under the PIT regulation. So it is sufficient if the person who's ever shared the information, he notified to the person that it is a UPSI and the recipient need to ensure compliance of the PIT regulation. NDA is not the only option.
Thank you. Shaileshri Madam, there are a lot of questions probably from our practicing CS friends about their responsibilities and rules, and will the auditors' firms also required to maintain the SDD software? Can they use the same software which the company is maintaining while sharing information to the company back?
See, auditors being fiduciaries must have an SDD in place. Now, same software means they can buy from the same vendor, but they cannot use the same server which the company is using to make the entry. They should have a separate system in their office wherein the necessary entries will be made as to how the UPSI of their client companies are collected and shared with the various partners, interns, articles, whatever you might call.
Okay. Assuming a professional is giving the compliance certificate on maintenance of SDD, what should be the approach, documentation, and format of certificate?
Format of certificate is being given in the the guidance manual. But having said that, from this year end onwards, that is 31st March 2023, it's going to form an integral part of our annual compliance reports, that is ACR, which we are doing for the compliances under the SEBI rules, regulations, guidelines, etc., etc., etc. So, as I was trying to give out few hints during my opening remarks, so they have to check every single point about the SDD, whether it is maintained in-house, whether it is maintained, it's bought from a vendor, whether vendor has access to the SDD, who are all entering, how are the entries made, whether you can enter 10-15 days later, whether you can modify the entry that has been made. Sometimes, the software doesn't allow, most of the softwares do not allow a modification. It will be shown only as an additional entry that is made. So, but that kind of audit, whether it is linked to email that are being sent, whether all the UPSI that is generated in the company are captured in the SDD. So some points, as I said, could be your regulation 30 disclosure, minutes, discussions in the board meetings, audit committee meetings, finance committee meetings, etc. So these are some things. So everything cannot be a checkbox. We have to, think, apply, and find out how best the SDD can be applied to the particular company under audit. But at the end of the day, we have to see that it is maintained as per the regulations.
Okay.
And just to add, there is a suggested checklist given in the manual on STD. If the people want, they can refer the checklist. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Rajendra Chopra, this is a question to you. What are the guiding points to devise an internal SOP for capturing information in the SDD in case of a listed entity or intermediaries?
I think for capturing the information on STD, if somebody want to develop a SOP, the first and foremost is how to identify the UPSI. That is important. There should be some guidelines, some broad parameter. If the broad parameters are triggered, then there should be a discussion whether the information should be treated as a UPSI or not. It can be the turnover basis, it can be the network basis, it can be the qualitative criteria, but there should be some guideline in the SOP to determine or at least evaluate a transaction or an event as UPSI or not. Second is the awareness. There has to be, like Celestri explained, there has to be some people in each department. It can be one or more. Wherever the UPSI can be, can be generated, people need to be guided on the statutory obligations. So there has to be a process of making them aware about the statutory obligation. That yes, this is a requirement. If UPSI is determined, they will make the entries in the STD. Entries have to be made immediately. So similarly, all the guidelines have to be incorporated. Likewise, the guideline SOP also need to contain the guideline on how to share the UPSI. They need to explain that if they are sharing to external person, they need to explain that this is a UPSI. They need to comply with the PIT regulation. They cannot trade in the securities of the company. If they share the information with anybody else, they need to maintain SDD independently. Likewise, if they are sharing the information internally, they have to restrict the further circulation without proper control, unless the information is shared on need-to-know basis. Then the obligation to maintain the database, etc. These are some of the factors which need to be incorporated in the SOP. So one is how to determine the UPSI. Second, how to make the entries or who shall make the entries. Third is, what are the obligations if they have to deal with the UPSI.
Okay. Continuing with the UPSI, Mr. Avishkar, whether certain designated person have UPSI when trading window is required to be closed for them, and whether exchanges is required to be intimated for the same.
So basically at this juncture, just to go a bit in detail. So what we have tried to do over the period in this PIT spaces for financial results, we have implemented it for Nifty and Sensex companies, wherein say if for financial result the trading window is on, during that period we actually, if the company has provided the PANs of the designated persons, but then we go and block the trading account as well as the depositories account of this particular designated persons and all that. So this step has been taken already implemented, and over a period we'll keep on extending it to other scripts and all that way. So coming to your specific question, that say if that designated person has that information, then during trading window technically he cannot trade itself, in the sense then he will be will consider him as an insider who has traded in that particular security and all that.
Okay. Mr. Rajendra, another question on UPSI. If a UPSI is shared with a person in a team and the UPSI data is saved in a common folder, which can be accessed by all the team members, then in that case, is it required to include the names of all the team members or only the one with whom it is shared?
Okay, good question. First, whether you can store a UPSI in a common shared drive, which is accessible to the multiple people. The answer is you need to be careful, because the law says that the UPSI need to be shared with the people on need-to-know basis. How would a person justify if he upload the data on a common server or information on a common server which is accessible by all who may or may not be required to have access to the UPSI? So it may not be a good option to upload the UPSI on a common server where the people who are not required to have access to the information get the access to the UPSI. Second, if it is so, then the name of all the people who have access to the common folder, their name need to be included in the STD.
Okay. Again, a couple of more questions on UPSI. If there is no UPSI during the reporting period, is the company still required to submit the certificate? For example, nominee directors sharing information to the bank or financial institution for legitimate purpose, will it also be covered as a communication of UPSI?
It has two parts. First, you said if in a quarter there is no UPSI, then whether the certificate is required to be shared or not. Certificate is a statutory requirement. regulatory requirement and it has to be submitted, he can say nil UPSI. But I was wondering, can there be a company where in a quarter there is no UPSI? At least they will approve the quarterly results. So I'm curious to know, can there be a situation, if the panelist can guide me?
Yeah, I'm curious too. Can there be a quarter with no UPSI at all?
So that also, when we check, as I said, few companies have said only financial results is the UPSI, and none other announcements which they have made under Regulation 30, they have said it's UPSI, even though they were price sensitive, has impacted prices and all that.
At least financial results will be there.
At least financial results are there, and that is a UPSI. But
that is the only UPSI.
There was a second question on sharing with the financial institution. What is that question, Mohan?
Nominee directors sharing their financials with their bank.
Yeah. So whether the sharing of the information by nominee director with the bank need to be entered in the SDD. Yes, that need to be entered in the SDD.
Okay. Another question on UPSI. If UPSI is shared with the same people every quarter, is it necessary that we record the details of such persons every quarter?
Yes.
No doubt about it.
Because while the person is same, the information is different.
Yes.
While we are on this, recently there was one SEBI order on a real estate company. So even before the financials were actually, the MIS data, etc., was generated, they used to have, a mechanism by which the sales during the quarter, city-wise, state-wise, etc., would be put to the managing director on the 5th or the 4th of the month. Whether that is UPSI, because that kind of tells you that the revenue generated is so much. The company is going in this manner, etc. SEBI has held that even that is a UPSI. So while you were saying that can be absolutely no UPSI in a quarter is very surprising. It's just not possible.
Yeah. But in the context of the judgment which you are quoting, it depends on the fact and circumstances.
Exactly, case-to-case basis.
Whether the sale, the data on the sale for a quarter or for a particular period is a UPSI or not, it depends on the fact of the case.
Because it
so it's not a uniform formula. It should not become a uniform formula that every sale number or the turnover amount for the month is a UPSI. It's not a yardstick.
Okay. So, Mr. Rajendra Chopra, being a compliance officer, a lot of questions come to you. Practically, banks and law firm employees in general have resistance in sharing their PAN or other identity details for SDD purpose. How to deal with such a situation?
See, generally, I have seen at the beginning, even the company employee had resistance in sharing the details. But we need to educate, and one of the option I can suggest is share the information with only the managing partner or one person whosoever share the PAN number with him, and then ask him to share the information in turn within his team. Because being the law firm are fiduciaries, and they themselves are required to maintain their own database, SDD. So you share the information with only one person and let the one person share the information in turn with their team, whosoever is required to get the access.
Okay.
But these are practical challenges. People will express the resistance, but they all understand it is a statutory obligation. So they test your tolerance level, nothing else. A lawyer will not resist, he knows the law.
Mr. Avish, yeah.
Varsha ma'am want to explain something. I can see her.
No,
for a long time, she has been wanting to say something.
I was just thinking what practical solution you have come up with. But that is quite good, whatever you were saying, because that is also a very practical solution. And what we want is, even if they are resisting, at least we should enter something. It should not happen, okay, they are not giving the details, so we are not entering anything. Suppose a director is not giving you the PAN, at least add their DIN number. because the number is available publicly. So whatever public information is there, at least capture that. Don't take the shield saying, ki, okay, they are not sharing, so we are not entering. Whatever best possible solution you enter, and whatever Mr. Rajendran just said, it is a very practical solution. It can also be implemented. We are okay with that.
Ms. Shaileshri, what are the records, documents, data to be seen, verified for the purpose of issuing a certificate on compliance of SDD under SEBI PIT regulations by a PC?
Keeping a specific case before also, open the SDD, make test entries and see whether entries are being made properly. Check the entries that have been made there. Take a list of the designated person. I recently I came to know in one place where the CFO's name was not there in the SDD. It could be by inadvertence, or it could be, so check whether all the designated persons' names are there in the SDD, and check also the PAN number, and if PAN number is not available, any other identifier is there. These are things which we have to check. Then, of course, whatever UPSI is floating. Now, we cannot take a decision as to whether this is a UPSI or not. The guidance would be disclosures made under Regulation 30, discussions that have been captured in the minutes book. That will help us to see if entry is required to be made in the SDD or not. And then, who are the people who are authorized to make the entry? And whether they have been, if, as Mr. Rajendra was saying, if there is any change, who is authorized to make the change, and how is the change done to that particular UPSI? This is a very simple thing to do.
I want to add one more thing here, that we came across in a certain case wherein, like you said, now all the DP's name are supposed to be there in SDD, but that was not the case. Company specifically told they have some internal practice wherein they designate all the people of a particular department like finance or accounts when the results are being declared as designated persons. But all the names are not included in the SDD. SDD, only those names are included wherein information is sharing need to know basis. So it is not necessary that those people who are designated as designated persons, their names will actually be there in, all the names will be in SDD. So that you will have to see depending on how the company's policies are and whatever is the information shared.
Also very important to note that, while looking at the SDD, you can see only those information which has been categorized as UPSI by the company. Now, it is also possible that the company has missed to categorize some information which was material and which should have been categorized as UPSI. So beside the SDD database, I think the auditor should check one, public records. Through Google, we can find out what the material information about the company. The board minutes to understand if there was any significant decision which was taken which could have triggered the categorization of the information as a UPSI. And maybe interaction with the management to understand if there was any significant event which needed evaluation from the UPSI identification point. And these are the qualitative check which a person should do while auditing.
Like I mentioned in my talk also, there was a case wherein company did not declare that as UPSI, but we considered it as UPSI and we proceeded against that particular trading.
Yes,
correct.
Shaileshri Madam, is the secretarial auditor required to report all non-compliances reported under SDD compliance certificate in MR3 and annual secretarial compliance report?
Not in the MR3, but definitely in the annual compliance report. And if he or she as a secretarial auditor does not report, consequences do follow. So it's up to the secretarial auditor.
Okay. Mr. Avishkar, what is the difference between the two forms of database? Database of DPs and database of UPSI sharing required to be maintained by the company.
So that if Rajendra can cover that, because they will be actually aware of this particular.
Yeah. So DPs is a universe of the employees who are expected to have access to the UPSI. It includes CO -2 level. It includes certain department who are expected to have the UPSI, the KMPs, etc. The number can, like in my organization, the number runs into 400, 500. The SDD is a database where the actual UPSI is shared with the person. So it is possible that a person is a designated person, but he may not have access to the UPSI. Just an example, suppose we are a pharmaceutical company and we have a quality head. Now, in the quarterly result, we share the information with certain people, say CFO. So while CFO being he's a designated person and he's a recipient of the UPSI, his name will be entered in both DP register and SDD. But the quality head, since he do not receive the financial results until these are published, his name will only be in the depository designated persons list, but not in the UPSI. So designated person is a wider concept. The SDD database is a very specific concept.
Okay. Varsha madam, from a merchant banker perspective, in case of an IPO, there are multiple other intermediaries involved in the transaction, which makes it difficult to have details of all the persons who might have access to the UPSI. Please guide us how to deal with such a situation and maintain SDD.
Not very clear what exactly these people want to know, because the requirement from our side is if the company is proposed to be listed, it has to maintain the SDD as per the UPSI that is being created over a period of time. Now, what exactly are these people wanting to know? Not very clear.
Can I give you this thing? See, I think what they're trying to say, this question must have come from a merchant banker. A merchant banker is saying that since he's handling an IPO, they may have several other intermediaries who are associated with the issue, like registrars, bankers, custodian, this, that, X, Y, Z. So how can I enter all the employees in their respective organizations? So the job of the merchant banker is not to enter the names of all the employees in all these organizations. Whatever information is being shared, with whoever be the intermediary, that entry will be made by the merchant banker in the SDD maintained by the merchant banker. Now, it is up to the registrar to make an entry in their SDD as to with whom they have shared, by the banker with whom they have shared. So the chain goes down like that.
Yes, I agree with what she's saying.
Okay. Mr. Rajendra, under PIT regulations, can a company have multiple compliance officers to close the trading window? Assume a company has multiple divisions and the CEO of each division can be designated as a compliance officer in charge of closing the trading window and monitoring UPSI within his or her division.
See, there is no restriction in the law which says that you can have only one compliance officer who should close the trading window. But administratively, I think it makes more sense to have only one person who decides to close the trading window for the entire organization. It is possible that there can be multiple compliance officers to assist or to help and partner. But if the responsibility is given to multiple people, it may so happen that there will be overlapping notification and people will get confused. Imagine A gives us a notification that the trading window will be closed from 1st April to 10th April. The another person saying trading window will be closed from 1st April to 15th May till my announcement of the result. Now people will get confused, right? Whether the window is closed from 1st to 10th or from 1 to 15th of May. So theoretically it is possible, but it is not recommended.
Okay. Mr. Avishkar, this company enters details of internal window closure as well as in SDD. It would differ then what is informed to the stock exchange, how stock exchange would see this, and what could be the probable questions as other trading window closure were confidential, cannot be disclosed, and did not trigger dissemination in requirement.
So I'm not getting this question.
Understand.
Yeah, we didn't understand the question. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, in case company enters details of internal window closure as well as in SDD, it would differ then what is informed to the stock exchange? How stock exchange would see this, and what could be their probable questions to other trading window closure were confidential and cannot be disclosed and did not trigger dissemination requirement?
What I think they are meaning is general window closure we are having, let's say for financial results from the first day of the financial quarter till 48 hours after it becomes public. Now, there could be some amalgamation or some other merger or something that is happening wherein the selected few people, there would be an internal window closure or a communication saying that these people cannot trade in the shares. So probably that fact, is it required to be entered in the SDD at all in the first place? That's my question number one. I think that's not required. So the question is, if we enter that and then we only give an official trading window closure to the stock exchange, would it be contradictory? Will exchange take an action? I think that's what they're trying to ask.
Correct. Yeah, you are right.
So in such cases, we won't, in the sense, basically say, I will just elaborate on how the exchange thing also works. We basically say when we ask for data, when we ask for SDD data and all from the listed entity, it is basically after we have analyzed the trading data or say the announcements which have been flowing in from the company. And at that particular point of time where we are certain that there are certain set of clients who may have just got lucky and all that, for that particular set of people, then we go back to the company. We actually give the names to the company and ask them to analyze and come back on whether this particular set of names, because as Shaileshri ma'am was also saying, typically when the exchange analyzes insider trading and all, it won't be that the designated person has only traded and all. There could be a chain of people, and this person who has actually traded maybe way below the chain, somewhere hiding below. So in such cases, what we do is we actually share the names and ask the company to cross-check whether at some point of time this particular set of 4 or 5 people were aware of this particular UPSI. So the trading window, whether it was maintained or not, actually doesn't impact it from the exchange perspective. Exchange will look at the announcement, and if that announcement was UPSI and a set of people have got benefited, then for them it becomes like a investigation from insider trading. So trading window doesn't impact our decisions and all that.
A preventive step that is taken by the company so as to protect or warn its employees that you are in possession of UPSI, please don't trade in the shares of the company. Now, if they don't trade and they pass on the information, say down the line, and somebody else trades, then, then exchange, when in its routine investigation or special investigation as it may, will pick up these.
But in this particular case, I'm just trying to elaborate on another area which specifically, as earlier also I said, for Nifty companies or Sensex companies, we actually tried this experiment of blocking the PANs from trading, and so we keep on always saying that there should be some training programs for employees so that they are aware that they should not be trading during the trading window closure and all. So as a experiment basis, we actually went and checked whether, say, out of these companies where we had actually blocked, whether any order was coming into the system, because say typically how the exchange system works is you as a designated person is allowed to place the order. Once the order is given the number, it goes and checks whether in which symbol you have placed. So example, I'm just taking an hypothetical example. You are a designated person in say Cipla. So if you have placed an order, it goes and checks whether you are placing Cipla or other script. So if it's other script, the order goes through, and if it's Cipla, then it gets rejected. So in such cases also, so after putting so many controls and all, also there are instances where orders hit the exchange. So it's like, say, you keep on building the systems, you keep on investing or making this, but people, if they were aware and if they are educated properly, then so many technical changes and all in trading also is not required type of thing and all that.
Okay. Moving on, Mr. Rajendra, when acquisition talks are going on, the complaints officer comes to know at the 11th hour when the board meeting is held in such scenario, how the SDD should be maintained?
See, if we read Regulation 5, the responsibility to ensure compliance about the STD lies with the board of directors. Now, it is possible that company secretary was not involved from the beginning of the stage or until the board meeting. In that case, the board of directors should identify somebody, whosoever they feel appropriate, to ensure compliance and make the entries in the STD. I agree that if he's not aware about the information, how can we expect him to make the entries? But what his responsibility is to enable the system, to have the processes, etc., etc. If there is a UPSI about M&A and he is not aware about it, then it is the responsibility of the board or the CEO to ensure that whosoever, there is somebody who is enabled and who has been given the responsibility to ensure compliance of 3.5, means make the entries in the STD. Company secretary in that case will be able to prove his genuineness. Sorry, innocence, not genuineness.
I think we should add one more point to this, that other heads also should be sensitized that, that in case they feel it's an SDD, probably, they should be making the entry themselves or even discuss with the company secretary whether an entry should be made at an earlier stage.
Yes.
Okay. There is a requirement of passing a board resolution for appointment of professional for furnishing this certificate.
Which certificate? This is now part of the ACR.
SDD compliance certificate.
That is now part of ACR. So there's no. Once you're appointed a secretarial auditor by board resolution, automatically the secretarial auditor is required to give this certificate.
Okay. Mr. Avishkar, as per the SDD compliance certificate, how do we calculate the events? The events that only needs to be reported to stock exchange are all the events that the company treat as UPSI?
So in this particular case also, we were very clear on that particular part that say how you have to do is say, again, this was in the past, but I will then to cover, say if you are giving a certificate for 31st December, look at what all announcements you have made from 1st October till 31st December to the exchange. And that in that as say financial results will be one event. And there are, then you will have to classify for the remaining part, whether it's an UPSI or a non-UPSI event, and the UPSI events have to be added to the financial results, and that will become the sum together of all the events to be reported to the or entered to in the structured digital database. So what Shailesh Madam also covered earlier is not all announcements made under Regulation 30B considered as UPSI in such cases. So if you have made say 10 announcements under Regulation 30 in a particular quarter, 10 need not be your figure. Your figure will be the financial results plus 1 or 2, whatever that UPSI you have actually done, that will be has to be entered in the database.
Just to add to what Avishkar said, there are 3 types of UPSI. One, the UPSI which close favorably and result into a public disclosure. Say, for example, M&A transaction. There can be another type of UPSI. We considered and categorized the information as a UPSI, but for some reason, the information did not conclude favorably and therefore never triggered a public disclosure. Suppose my company was evaluating an M&A proposal, it didn't materialize, we dropped the idea. Right? Negotiation did not succeed or it didn't make a sense for both the party. The program was dropped or the transaction was dropped. There is no event that I will go public about it. Right? I will not say that I evaluated this transaction and then it did not conclude. That is also a UPSI. Third is a UPSI which started in a particular quarter, maybe on say 15th March. Today it is a UPSI. We still have not concluded the UPSI. Still discussions are on and there is a deadline to submit the disclosure or a certificate. Now, In this scenario, suppose these are the three information, will I treat all three as UPSI for the purpose of disclosure? Will I say that there were three UPSI, or I will say two UPSI, or I will say one UPSI? According to me, both, whether, both the UPSI which have concluded favorably or unfavorably has to be considered for the purpose of calculating the numbers. The third, which is still work in progress, that can be excluded for the purpose of calculation of number or for the purpose of the disclosure. Please correct me, Aviskar, if the understanding is different.
Yes, the understanding is.
Sir Avishkar, a government company has issued debentures of rupees 10 lakh face value to institutional investors, and the bonds are not actively traded in NSE. Under this circumstance, is PIT regulation applicable to it?
Yes, the PIT is applicable because it's listed. So again, you have to go by that particular thing.
They are also asking, can we ask exemption from SEBI under any regulations?
Varsha ma'am is here.
So this, companies have represented, but clearly the regulations are very clear on this particular aspect that they have to maintain it. And if there is again, I'm just opening it up because if there is any genuine concern in the sense on the implementation or anything, then at this juncture also SEBI are open to suggestions. And also just to elaborate, recently we last month only we had this meeting with few companies and all on this cloud part, which Narasimhan sir also covered in the initial part and all that. So that is also being considered at this juncture, whether we give some sort of a leeway on the cloud, because FAQ 7 or so has clearly articulated that you cannot maintain it on cloud. Few have represented that clouds is the way the technology advancement is going to take place. So there are certain companies who are not keeping the data on servers but on clouds, and that is safe and all that. So that part is also considered. So if there is something which is genuine and so at this juncture also SEBI is ready to listen and make amendments to FAQs or the regulations.
Okay. In a scenario where a company inadvertently misses to enter certain UPSI under SDD, but there was no trading done in that particular quarter, how will the regulator or exchange act upon such case?
No, so in that particular case, basically at this juncture, we have not gone till that particular level. But again, taking the cue from what last month we had this meeting where the ED sir has clearly articulated that if there is any non-compliance, then they will go in for some sort of a enforcement action and all. He has clearly articulated in that particular conversation. So that's why maintenance is mandatory. Trading, not trading and all, then there could be some companies who will come and say, okay, mine is fairly illiquid security, mine is suspended, so I need not maintain it. So there is no scope for various scenarios. Yes, the exceptions will keep on adding that way, but there are no exceptions. You have to maintain it. That is the way.
Thank you. Mr. Rajendra Chopra, what will be the next step when the compliance officer identify a particular UPSI? Whether he has to promptly give the PAN of all designated persons to the depository? Does he need to close the trading window? You can kindly explain the procedure.
Sorry, I missed some part of the question. I didn't understand.
No. What is the next step once you identify a UPSI? Whether you need to give the PAN immediately to the depository, and whether you have to close the trading window, what should the company secretary do in such cases? Okay,
understood. So once a UPSI has germinated, the first step is to sensitize to the people that UPSI need to be dealt very carefully as per the law. The information should be shared only on need to know basis. Second, he need to maintain the SDD for all the people whosoever receive the information. And he need to guide to the people that if they share the information further with anybody else, the entry have to be made in the structural digital database. So these are the compliances which I would suppose. I don't think we need, I mean, to my understanding, we don't have to give the detail of the people who received the UPSI to the NSDL or CDSL. We
So
don't have to provide the information.
that part maybe they may be linking it to the financial results part where it has been implemented by designated depositories that information has to be provided of the PANs, and then they go and block the trading and
but that is separate, Avishkar.
Yes,
when we provide the day the person become a designated person, we provide their detail to the NSDL or CDSL.
Yes, yes.
It is not linked to the SDD.
And it is linked more to the disclosure for trading and all that.
Yes, so there are 2, 3. In the sense, this when we talk about SDD, but there is another one, that system-driven disclosure. Under that, for PIT purpose, also they provide the PAN numbers wherein we check whether if it has exceeded 10 lakhs, and we combine our data along with depository and then disseminate on our website. So that may be.
Thank you. Panelists, more than 17,000 members logged in as of now, and we have more questions coming up. Until 5 o'clock, we'll try to answer maximum questions possible. Shailashri madam, can a company keep backup of the data which is stored on the principal server as a matter of precaution to prevent data loss in the future? Is it permissible to keep the backup data on a common server?
It is permissible. You have to have backup because you are required to, store your data or preserve the data for 8 years. And anything can happen in a technology-driven environment. Some system may crash and etc. The only thing is, whatever backup we do, it has to be under lock and key, non-tamperable. No, everybody, all and sundry should not have access. And if you're keeping it on a server which is common for all group entities, have firewall so that your company's data doesn't mix and match up with another group company's data. That's the only thing.
Thank you. Mr. Rajan.
Just one point. Mohan, one point. You asked me about the next step after, UPSI is generated. I didn't mention that trading window also need to be closed. So that was also action which I missed explaining.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Rajendra, when the UPSI is seized, then also should we enter in SDD?
UPSI seized. What do we enter in SDD then? I'm trying to understand the question, sorry.
No, it is a very simple slide. Only one line they have written.
Seized in what manner? It has become public or it has become unfavorable. Only the two things.
Correct. If it in either situation, they need to open the trading window for the people, and people can deal in the securities of the company after 48 hours.
SDD, you make the last entry, become public, closed.
Yeah,
so on this particular matter, say that's why I will take help of Rajendra and Shailashri ma'am also on this. We had this one particular incident or a narration, example which they have given. So what is happening in such scenarios? The company is coming out with an announcement that, say, example, they will be entering into an agreement or whatever. It can be a project subject to regulatory approval, and they go to their regulator. Say it can be, say, RBI or other regulators, and at that particular point of time, because of the compliances or the regulator there goes and denies the permission, and this entire announcement which has been made goes for a toss. So their thing was, say, I have made a particular announcement stating that I am going in for a particular project, and then after, say, 3 months or so, it is going to fail. In such case, whether that 3 months I should cover it or not was the scenario which they were specifically asking. Whether for the 3 months also I should then maintain the STD, because there could be to and fro interactions and all, and it has not finalized or gone live that way.
Now, if there is an improvement over each stage, the entry has to be made.
Right. So what typically happens is, say, in this particular case, if the regulator rejects this particular proposal, then it has an impact on the price also. So suddenly the prices crash. So then the exchanges or the regulators going for investigation, and that time they will say, okay, who were aware of, say, from your announcement till that, say, regulator denying you, because there would have been some interaction, and the company officials or someone would be aware of such information that there is not going to proceed ahead and all that.
Yes. So if there is a development, like I had actually been a witness to one such incident some 7-8 years ago. There was a company which had applied for a banking license. So this company actually what they did was at the moment they made an application, they informed the stock exchange under regulation 30 saying that they've applied for a banking license. And every time RBI asked for a clarification, they used to inform exchange, clarification asked, provided, etc., etc., etc. And obviously, every time a clarification was given, price slowly, building up. But then ultimately, it led to a situation where RBI refused to give them the banking license. Now, the company just kept quiet. They did not inform the exchange at that particular stage. Now, if you actually see every time that an announcement was made, there has been an impact. So, if there is going to be an impact, yes, my interpretation would be yes. If there is a positive clarification that has been given or a negative clarification that has been given, an entry has to be made. A change in the position, entry has to be made. If it's the same, there's no change. A mere, some letter that was missed out, which we are giving now, or some, data which we had missed in entry and then we are supplying now, no entry to be made. So we have to make a distinction based on the scenario.
I have a perspective on this. Now, let's take a scenario where a information or a, like we said, banking license was concluded to be a UPSI and the company make a disclosure that we are entering into this business subject to regulatory approval. Now the company applies to the regulator, right? The public disclosure has been made. Subsequently, the application is made to the regulator. A regulator asks the information, company provide the information. But if the company or the officers of the company cannot get an indication through the disclosure whether the RBI is going to approve or reject, it is not a UPSI. And according to me, for the 3 months, the window need not to be closed. Because they do not know what is the conclusion which is going to happen. They are simply providing the information. Unless the flow of information is indicating that yes, this is going to be approved or rejected. Because then they are privy to the information which is not aware, which public is not aware.
I think very well articulated. That's precisely what even I was.
And in that scenario, if finally the application is approved or rejected, that information needs to be communicated to the public. But if that information is withheld, then that again need to be evaluated whether the approval or a rejection is a UPSI or not. But I think these are two separate development, need a separate evaluation. And technically it is possible to say that once the announcement is made, the information is no more a UPSI unless another trigger has happened.
Thank you, Mr. Rajendra. Actually, madam, the normal working results which are not likely to materially affect the price of securities, whether they have to be required to be entered in the SDD.
I don't understand what is normal and what is abnormal. Results have to be entered. Full stop.
Mr. Rajendra, fiduciaries are required to enter the details of information received from company and information shared ahead. Will the fiduciary maintain all this information in the same SDD or a different one?
Same SDD means company's structural digital database.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
In my opinion, they cannot use the company's software for maintaining their own database. They have to have their own database.
Okay. Shailashri madam, since intermediary and fiduciary are many times very small firms or individual PCS who are assisting listed companies and listed companies, and when they get UPSI access, will such small firms also be mandated to maintain SDD in digital mode? The cost of software is 10x of the fees of such a firm or professional. Please get
so that is what the regulation says, although it is, I agree with what the person is saying. So if suppose it's only one single man or one single woman entity, you're not going to share it further with anybody else. But then if you're going to have a big firm with a lot of people, you'll have to weigh the cost versus this thing and get the best possible SDD in the most economic manner, because that's what the regulation is unfortunately mandating.
So we get this request from the SME companies also. What they basically talk about is cost, and that may be true also. It means no one is denying on that particular part, but it's a part of regulation. So one has to be.
And nobody can give an exemption. Even I don't think SEBI is in any mood to give any exemption.
Right.
So you will not get any exemption.
Whether it is mandatory to have internal email IDs, corporate IDs of the designated persons, or any email ID provided by the DP can be used.
General practice is to have a corporate email ID that ensures sanctity of the information flow within the organization. A general Gmail or a Yahoo ID or something is not preferable. But if the company is so small that they cannot afford, then the choice is left.
See, Gmail ID or Yahoo ID are not the secured mail system. So if they are sharing UPSI on Gmail or on other,
or
public
Hotmail or whatever,
IDs, they need to evaluate whether this is the safe way to share the information, and because that can also compromise the compliance requirement.
Exactly. It's not preferred.
Okay. Mr. Avishkar, is the regulator revisiting the requirement of SDD for debt listed entities, private placement or something?
No, nothing at this juncture at least.
Okay. Mr. Rajendra, how a compliance officer can ensure that the UPSA has been captured when in fact he is not aware of that particular UPSA or transaction taking place far away from the place where he is sitting?
See, he need to lay down the processes and systems, and it's a journey. It's a journey. You need to continue to educate to the system, to the people in your organization. Like say, for example, my company, we have our subsidiaries in US also, we have in South Africa also, we have in Australia also. There are multiple countries where we have the information. So we continue to explain them the regulatory requirement of, CIPLA India, and, how do they need to ensure? You need to enable them. You need to engage with them. It is not necessary that they need to share the information with you. But if you create the channel of communication with the people, they will know that, okay, there is something called, trading window closure or trading restriction, which we need to have. There is some record which need to be maintained. You need to make them aware about this requirement. And they will know, and they will continue to consult to you that, okay, I'm evaluating this some transaction. This is what is the crux of the transaction, and tell me what do I need to do. Or this is the value of the transaction. Do I need to, treat it as a UPSI? Do I need to maintain the record? And without knowing the detail of the transaction, because it is confidential and you may not be required to know, you guide them on how to ensure compliance. You enable them, you give them access to maintain the digital database. They put the entries into the into the software. But it's a journey. You have to continue to invest your time with the people. It cannot be simply sitting at the desk and sending one email. People will not read the email. I can tell you. We will never be able to ensure the compliance. You have to interact with the people, ensure repetitive interaction. That will ensure the compliance.
Okay. The sharing of UPSI between two designated persons is required to be recorded in the database?
Yes. Anybody share the information with any other person, at least for the first time, it has to be recorded in the SDD.
Whether independent directors will be included under the purview of SDD provisions, whether any circular issued by SEBI wherein it is specifically mentioned independent directors are included.
All are covered the moment we share UPSI with anybody. It may be an independent director, it may be a full-time director, it could be anybody. Entry has to be. The moment it is shared, entry has to be.
Once a UPSI has been shared with a person under a project and details are entered in the SDD, do we need to make fresh entries while sharing a different UPSI pursuant to the same project with the same person?
Only if there is an update or a change in the information that was entered into earlier. So let's say we had, we were thinking of coming out with an IPO. In our mind, let's say we had a project of saying we are going to raise money to the extent of say 500 crores. A, this purpose, B, this purpose, C, this purpose. We make entry in the SDD with all the persons with whom this information is shared so that the DRHP or whatever is getting prepared or whatever it might be. I'm just saying rights issue. Now, after a point in time, we change our idea. We say it's no longer rights issue, but it is going to be a preferential allotment. Then it's a complete change, entry has to be made. Or even in the rights issue, let's say from 500 crores, it is becoming 900 crores, change in the size. So entry has to be made. Is changed and say, no, we are going to go for working capital. Change in the object. So again, entry has to be made. So we have to see if there is any change in the information that we have entered, entry will be made. But if it is the same thing again and again, same on the same matter, we are sharing additional information so that the documents can be prepared or some additional declaration can be created, then there is no entry that is to be. So we have to be able to apply our mind every time that we have to do an entry to see whether it is required or not. Any change in the information, any updation, that is when it is.
That is also a debatable point, Shalishri. Like there were several questions on financial results that there are different versions after the first version, second version, third version, etc. And obviously there are changes. So long as in your example, a preferential allotment or preferential issue has been recorded in the STD, whether the amount is 500 or 600 or 700, the change in the amount, should it require a fresh entry? Because the fact that the person sorry?
Because suppose let's say we are at 500, we suddenly change it to 800, then we are going to use it for some other purpose. So that could be a price sensitive matter. Maybe that could be,
so then it is not the amount of, it is not the amount of preferential allotment. You are saying the another transaction or the project becoming.
No, because the amount is either increasing or the amount
very
is
very important to clarify that the change in the amount is not the trigger. Identification of a new project can be the trigger for another UPSI recording. Very important to note. See, the amount can continue to change because this is still at a discussion stage. Today I decided to go for 500, tomorrow I decide 700. Maybe I'll come back to 400 also. So it is not a fresh UPSI because we are at a discussion stage and preferential allotment is a UPSI. But yes, you are right that today I decided to set up a project in, say, for example, Goa. Tomorrow I decide to set an additional project in Bangalore.
Or scrap
now it can be
buy something else. Do something.
Correct. So that can be a different UPSI. So it is very important to clarify that same information variation doesn't require, but yes, new project will require UPSI.
And even sometimes what happens, the price at which we make the rights issue or the FPO or the pref allotment. So pref allotment, of course, is all driven by formula as regards. But where it's a free pricing regime. Let's say we start with 100 rupees per share, but then by the time we reach the end, let us say we come to 50 or we go to 200. Again, it's a complete change because this is a UPSI. I think there also we may need to make
again, I would like to debate on this, that why change in the pricing should become a separate UPSI. It is the same UPSI, preferential allotment. Now, price discovery, there are negotiation and there are discussions through which ultimately the price is finalized by the merchant banker and the management or the stakeholders. Right? Now, preferential allotment is one UPSI, quantum is the subset of it, pricing is the subset of it. It continue to remain the same UPSI. Why should it require?
We will not have a problem. Essentially, this pricing will become a problem in an FPO or a right.
FPO,
you have an X amount in mind and you come out with another amount. I think Avishkar can add on something to this.
Right. When that actually purpose only changes, like say example preference to going to some other mode itself, then it becomes a matter that a separate entry needs to be done.
Yes. Pricing and amount and all these are subset of the same transaction. Yeah, that don't have to be treated as separate UPSI. But good point to highlight.
Yeah, a couple of last quick questions we'll take, and they're asking, in case of PSUs, the information flow is slightly different. in that case, the paper moves from one table to other in the ministry. How SDD complaints can be ensured in that case from internal, though for internal movement of UPSI.
So just to, again, I will take reference to the last month meeting where even we had called few PSUs. There also it was clearly articulated that there is no leeway for even PSUs in such cases. They have to find a way in this. So typically, again, just I'm taking a few seconds. In this case, what we basically suggest to companies who keep on asking few questions, which typically are operational in nature, is try to create a policy which is in line with the regulations, get it approved from the board and follow it consistently. So if that is done, this particular methodology is followed, then the compliance officer is that way safe because he has a policy in place which is in line with the regulations and he has been consistently following that particular regulations. That way.
Okay. Last one, kindly clarify in case of tenders, what will be considered as UPSA, whether receipt of L1, lowest bidder information, or receipt of letter of award?
L1 itself will be considered as UPSI. We have a case law in this matter. I can't recall the name. I think there were two brothers, some Savlas. They had a communication from ONGC that their bid is L1. And one of the brothers had traded in the shares. Not only had he traded, some other party with whom no connection except a Facebook connection was there, because the MD of that company and the MD of this company were friends on a Facebook. Their wives were friends on Facebook. They had liked several photographs. So the connection was established. And so, you know, at the intimation that they were L1 itself, the trade had taken place. So SEBI had held all three guilty and levied penalty also in this. So I'm not able to remember the name, but I know some Savla or somebody was the managing director of that. So there is a decided case law itself.
Thank you. Panelists, can we formally close with a formal vote of thanks? Can I go?
I have a question, Mohan, before we close. You know, we share many a time, we share certain information with the regulators. And incidentally, those information can be UPSI. Regulator do not share their, you know, their PAN number or details. How do we deal with this situation?
I think whatever we share, they are in public domain.
No, it is not public.
Not necessarily.
Not public domain.
No, so just to say in this particular case also, because this has been discussed multiple times. So in this particular case also, the stance is that even if it's the regulator's part, we'll have to record that particular, because it's say typically just to give an example in the banking industry or say there also, if something bigger has to be done, definitely you have to speak to RBI or some other regulator there before taking any major decisions and all that. So in such case, if that particular information is UPSA, you have to record it that way. So even exchanges don't have that particular leeway of not giving PANs and all that.
But can it be an interpretation that since the information is shared with Government of India and Government of India is not a person, and therefore the entry doesn't have to be made? It is a Government of India is a sovereign authority. We don't see, the problem is individual do not, they say I do not receive the information. It is a government who is receiving this information. So can it be a good argument? I mean, no offense, but people don't share. Government officer, you understand, Aviskar. Right. It's not easy to ask for any PAN number of an individual, personal information of an officer.
Right. So
every Government of India departments that your SDD.
At least that way. Means there are companies who have done in that particular manner where they have said that, okay, I have shared it with XYZ. He may not have the PAN number, but at least he has done that particular sort of entry. So because it's ultimately again going back to the basic thing, it is for establishing the trail from where that information is. So in case say tomorrow it comes for investigation and then say we come to know that okay, this particular transaction has taken place XYZ after it was shared with the say just an example government or XYZ, then it becomes a good tool for identifying or helps in investigations and all that.
But interestingly, I'll take one more minute. The regulation doesn't cover the government offices, does it? Because a lot of information for the listed entities flows from the government offices. Any approval, any allocation, any judgment, all can have, most of them have material, many of them have material impact. They don't maintain any SDD.
It's a fact.
It's a fact.
Yes.
So that is why I'm saying that, when they have been exempted from the compliance, why not to take an argument that yes, Government of India is a sovereign authority and therefore the information shared with the Government of India doesn't require maintenance of the database. They don't follow the protocol. They don't provide the information. So it may be a good point to consider.
Thank you, panelists. I take this opportunity to present the formal vote of thanks to our esteemed panelists on the very interesting topic of structured digital database. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Narasimhan, Vice President ICSI, for organizing this webinar for corporates as well as professionals practicing CS. I also would like to thank Mr. Rajesh Thapara, my council colleague and my member of Financial Services Committee, who along with me moderated this webinar. I also would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude towards Ms. Varsha Agarwal, General Manager, Integrated Surveillance Department of SEBI, for giving insight on the regulatory perspective with regard to SDD. Thank you very much, madam. Because of connectivity issue, about 15 minutes ago, madam, logged out. I would also like to thank Shri Avishkar Nayak, Vice President Surveillance NSE, for sparing his valuable time and giving us a thorough analytical inputs on technological requirements, cloud hosting, and all aspects with regard to the regulator perspective on SDD. Thank you very much, sir. I also would like to thank Mr. Rajendra Chopra, the man in hot seat, compliance officer, company secretary of Cipla Limited. Mr. Rajendra, the knowledge and expertise of a compliance officer was reflected in all your words. The role of compliance officer and the audit committee towards maintenance of SDD, compliance and reporting, all of that you explained beautifully, and you also answered all the questions wonderfully well. The entire CS fraternity will be benefited with your words. Thank you very much, Mr. Rajendra. I also would like to thank Shailashri Bhaskar Madam, practicing secretary, for sharing her expertise in the field of SDD. She explained various technical requirements of the compliance officer and also PCS in providing the certification required. It was really a memorable webinar. Thank you very much, madam. Finally, I would like to thank all the participants. I think the record participation of more than 17,000 members for watching this webinar through various social media platforms and making this webinar a very huge success. Thanks to Secretariat of ICSI. Thanks to all of you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. It was a wonderful webinar.